Hello. Hello, my friends. How are you? Thank you so much for coming to spend part of your Tuesday, August 6th with me. It's been exactly 1 week since we were together for the Ashley Benefield verdict. And we need to debrief about it because I went on vacation immediately after that verdict happened. We weren't able to really talk about it. So many of you have written me emails and commented nice things on the chat. You're worried about me, but I was fine. I was on vacation and all is well. The night the verdict was read, we weren't expecting a verdict. I thought we were coming on just to talk about a jury question. And there had been an earlier jury question during the day that I didn't go live for because I had been live for hours in the morning. So I thought we were just going to handle two jury questions together that evening. And then we kept talking. And then the verdict happened. And it was sort of like I had to jump off because I had to go pick up a kid. And we didn't really get to talk about it afterward. So here we are. We're back to talk about it. I don't ever tell you where I'm going, but I'll tell you where I've been. And I was in Las Vegas with my favorite band and friends and family, having an amazing time. And then my flight got canceled on Sunday when I was supposed to come back, and I had to stay in Vegas for another night. But I was at the Sphere with Dead and Company, John Mayer, Bob Weir, and all my favorites. So many friends and family, and it was amazing. I would say go, except next weekend is going to be the last weekend of the residency. So sadly, you won't be able to go. But I will, if you follow me on Instagram, be posting some video that I took at the Sphere, and it was really, really awesome. And that is my happy place. Grateful Dead concerts have been my happy place since I was in junior high. I think I went to my first Grateful Dead show when I was 13. And I got on the bus and I haven't gotten off. And it was what was so great about the Grateful Dead. And if you're watching on replay, just fast forward through this part if you don't like the chit chat. Some people have the nerve to stop on my comments and say, "Why don't you just get to the point?" Well, I'm getting to the point, except for I'm waiting for people to come in so they don't miss anything. So anyway, since I was about 13 years old, the Grateful Dead was always my happy place, going to concerts twice a year. They would come inevitably to New York for fall tour and spring tour. And for me, and my friends, it was like pushing the reset button of life because I've never seen so many happy people together in the same place at the same time and so many different kinds of people. And, the Grateful Dead really spanned all generations and all income classes and geographically, there were deadheads from everywhere. And I traveled to parts of the country I never would have seen otherwise if I wasn't following the Grateful Dead around, or as I say, they were following me around. And I'm so glad that so many other generations have gotten a chance to learn the music, love the music, and see 20,000 people. I think at the Sphere, maybe it seats 15,000. But, when you go to a stadium show at Citi Field, there's how many thousands of people all smiling at the same time for 5 hours. And it's pretty freaking awesome. So that's where I was. It was fantastic. Although I got to say, no offense to anybody who lives there, but I hate Las Vegas. I just hate it. I hate it. Every place smells like cigarette smoke. You have to you can't get it out of your hair. It's just, ugh, not my thing. I don't like to gamble. So, but aside from that, it was pretty freaking awesome. So follow me on Instagram and I'll post some of the video later. But there are crazy people out there on the internet. So I don't say where I'm going. I only say where I've been. And I've been, and it was awesome. To all of you that are suffering from the after effects of this Hurricane Debbie, my thoughts and prayers go out to you. It is, affecting lots of parts of Florida, the Carolinas, and leading to disruptions all over the country. But to anybody who's affected right now, my thoughts and prayers go out to you. And I'm sure same with everyone in the chat. It's starting to thunder now, so we're going to see how the internet works. I restarted the router before I went live, but I feel like it's a little bit laggy. So again, if my lips are not matching up with my voice, not a whole lot I can do about it. You can thank Hurricane Debbie for that. So how is everybody doing? So many people were so devastated in this chat by this verdict because we disproportionately, I have learned, have a very, very large following of survivors of not only DV, but SA, CSA, chronic pain. A lot of people, a lot of my followers and viewers have been through it. My demographic on this channel is, I think, something like 85% age 45 plus and something like 75% women. And I know you guys are tough and you've been through it all, you've seen it all. And because of that, we have a disproportionate percentage of viewers who are survivors, who have been through it, who understand, who get it, who know what it's like. And when I go, in disbelief to other channels and other chats, and I like to see what's going on out there sometimes, dip my toe in the water over there. There are a lot of people who don't get it. And I think that so many people thought that the jury came to the right verdict. So many more think that she was guilty than think that she was not guilty. And I think it's unfortunate. And I think it's because those people are in a couple of different camps. It's either the people who don't understand DV, who have never been through it and who never think that anybody could possibly be scared for their life if they weren't beaten within an inch of it at some time in the past. And I think some people thought that because there was no evidence of any prior beatings, that there's no way that Ashley Benefield could have been scared for her life in that moment. I think there are a lot of people out there who think she was acting, that it was fake. I, for one, believed her. I had a visceral reaction to her testimony. And I think that I have really good instincts and really good intuition. And in addition to that, for over 30 years that I've been an attorney, my entire practice was built around helping and representing victims and survivors of all kinds of horrific things. And so I think I, more than most, have an understanding of what the signs and symptoms are, of what the behavior characteristics are. And I had a visceral reaction to her testimony. I did not think that she was acting. I did not think that there were a lot of her mannerisms and tics and blinks and her shaking. I didn't think that could be faked. And so many people felt the need to write, nasty comments like, you had it all wrong. You were wrong. I don't think I was wrong. Juries sometimes get it wrong, right? So, just because you're on the wrong side of something, not even the wrong side of something, just because you have a different point of view and a better understanding of how these horrific things can happen and how certain people can behave under certain circumstances and how certain people think, oh, well, it happened to me, but it happened to me so much worse. So there's no way that she could have been in fear for her life. And then there are those who think that she planned it. Like, there are people who actually think she planned it. She lured him to her house. She sent her mother and her daughter to the park because she wanted to be a single mom. And, I saw some comments after by cousin Tommy about, he said that he thought that she had been, researching him, Doug, before she even met him, and that he was a target. And like, what do these people think? She lured him to the house. She shot him dead to be a single parent, to get him out of the way. And then what? She was just going to risk it and risk going to prison for the rest of her life to be a single mom and then leave her daughter with no parents. Like, that whole argument just doesn't even make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me, like, logically. She wanted to get him out of the way and she was just going to risk it with a jury. Somebody explain that to me, because I know there's people out there who feel that way. Any man who could throw a cat down the stairs and a cat against the wall and punch a dog into unconsciousness, I think is probably capable of doing far worse things. In fact, if you ask anyone who profiles serial killers, they will tell you that serial killers often start with torturing animals. So the fact that there was no history of prior punches to Ashley herself, to me, is a non-starter argument, because how many is a person entitled to? The question was, and I told you this when we were doing all our pretrial, my words will come back, my pretrial stuff and our pretrial briefing and then during the trial, is that it's all going to come down to whether or not the jury believed her that in the moments leading up to the shooting that she was in fear for her life. And for me, based on her testimony that she was cornered in the room, that he looked at her in this fighting stance and said, "You're effing done." And she's backed into a corner, which, by the way, he chased her into that room. There was no other way out. There happened to be a firearm in there because most, if not all, gun owners are going to tell you, and I'm not one, so I can't say, but that you're not going to pack your firearms into a U-Haul. And she had multiple. I don't know if 2 of them were hers and 1 was her mom's, but she had a licensed permit. She had a carry permit. I think she had a concealed carry permit, right? Um, she happened to run in there because she tried to get out the front door. Remember her testimony? She tried to get out the front door. And he blocked the front door. And then he came after her, according to her testimony, and slammed open. She shut the door. He slammed open, he burst through the door. "You're effing done," because she had said to him that she wasn't gonna, she wanted to be with him. He was following her to Maryland anyway. They weren't going to live together. And in that moment, that's why maybe she fired 4 shots, 1 or 2. She wasn't a great shot. She was a good shot though. That's the thing. So she could have been one and done. There were 2 in the hall, 1 in the leg, and I just, it didn't make any sense to me how these other opinions, and they're very, very strong opinions out there, by the way, very strong opinions. There were very few creators, I think, who believed Ashley's testimony. I know that Defense Diaries, Bob and Jay, I thought both, and Allie and Shannon, I think that they were very sympathetic to Ashley. And I think that Peter Tragos also understood Ashley's testimony. But I think for the most part, there weren't a lot of people on the other side of this, as I was. And that's okay. That's okay. I'm not going to change my testimony. I'm not testifying. I'm not going to change my opinion to please the masses. Because what I have found, I'm going to show you a little clip that I found also, because I watched this video the other day. I'm like, wow, this really resonates. Hate sells. People don't like happy things anymore. They love hate. If you perpetuate hate, you're going to get more engagement. And I wondered about this on Twitter too, because there are some people out there. I mean, I quit Twitter because I never really had any followers anyway. And then when I started covering Karen Reed, people were really coming for me. And I'm like, who wants to do this all day long? Like, what about this is fun? And I see people who post this hateful stuff and then they get all kinds of nasty comments. And it's sort of like, that's the way that you monetize on Twitter. It doesn't matter if the engagement is good or positive or it's horrible. You're still going to get paid by Twitter the more engagement you have. And so people leave these hateful comments up there. And it's like, who needs all that hate in their life? But that's the thing. Hate sells. Hate sells. Nobody wants to watch happy stuff anymore. If the news is happy, nobody's turning on the news, right? People like hate. I don't get it. And I find it repulsive. And I'm not going to have a channel like that. So that's why my moderators are so strict. And that's why we take things around here so seriously. Because if you want to perpetuate hate and nastiness, then you can go somewhere else. And I'm very open about it. Just, go somewhere else. You can find that somewhere else. You could pay for that somewhere else if you pay for YouTube Premium. If not, it's free. Turn the channel. I don't get it. Kelly, thanks for being a member for 2 months. Says she wouldn't be anywhere else. Thank you. Thanks, Kelly. Hey, David Reese, what up? He thinks it was a compromise verdict. I think you might be right. Maybe. People were saying, how could one person who's not guilty have went back in there after 45 minutes and just changed their mind? I don't think that was it. I don't think it was a not guilty that changed their mind to guilty. I think perhaps there was a holdout on murder, and then they convinced that person to go for the lesser included manslaughter. Maybe that's what happened. But I'm looking into other stand your ground cases today, and I'm like, how is it? That Trayvon Martin's killing, how is it that that Zimmerman was acquitted in that case? And the popcorn case, how is it that that person, felt in fear for their life and that person was acquitted? Like, what is going on here? Is it just that people people are not educated enough on DV that they can't see the signs. I don't know, but we're here to talk about it today. Somebody said because they're men. I see that. I don't know. I don't know if it's because they're men. I don't know. Is it because this was an intimate partner thing and because those other 2 cases that I referenced were strangers? But I feel like in an intimate partner situation, you could be in more fear because you know perhaps what that person is capable of doing. When it's against a stranger, you have no idea, right? So, I can't make sense of it. Will there be appeals? Yeah, I'm sure there will be. She's looking at potential 30 years in prison, and if you looked at any of the post-trial interviews with Eva and cousin Tommy, they want her to get the full 30. AKA the cat lady, thank you so much for your super chat. Been thinking about lesser included since this trial. The state has all the resources and power already. If they can't meet the burden, they shouldn't get consolation prizes. I agree. And I don't know if Florida rules require the lesser included. I kind of think that they do, but it's a hard decision to make if you're a defense attorney and you have the choice of either getting the murder 2 or the manslaughter because, your client could be looking at life in prison or, the 30 years. Do you want to give them the choice? But I think in this case, I don't think there was an option. But I happen to agree with you. Like if they can't prove their case on murder 2, then they shouldn't be able to get the defendant on something because I think the jury's instructions are confusing. I think that a typical juror doesn't necessarily understand the instructions. In this case, I didn't think they were that confusing, not like Karen Reed. And I also think that I have so many thoughts. I have so many thoughts that we will get to them, I'm sure, because I'm sure you will have the same questions that I have. Pilgrim Shadow, thank you so much for the 20. Welcome back. Hello, Warriors. Strangers stopping strangers just to shake their hand. Everybody's playing in the Heart of Gold band. They played that. They played that while I was there, and it was awesome, and the graphics were awesome, and the Sphere is an amazing place, and thank you. Pilgrim Shadow, if you know, you know. Thank you, Barbara, for the Venmo. You guys are awesome. I'm just a girl in the world. It's glad to see me. I'm glad to see you too. Thanks for the 5. David, yeah, he admitted to throwing a gun at her. That's attempted assault. Yeah, but it wasn't charged. That's the thing. She tried to go through the system so many times. She tried to get restraining orders. She tried, and it wasn't working. The system wasn't working for her. The only reason it worked in South Carolina is because it was a consent order. She had a stay away order, but they consented to it. And she said, to get it quicker. He shot that gun in the ceiling. I don't know how many gun owners I have in the chat, but have you ever shot a gun into the ceiling to get somebody to shut up? This is this is like a coercive control type situation, and a lot of people don't understand it. And I think that people were just like, "Oh, she's guilty. She's just guilty." Never even considered that it could be something like self-defense. It's a shame. Bohemia, thank you so much. He's a malignant narcissist. After love bombing, the mask drops, and your whole life becomes an act of self-defense. The press portrayed her so wrong, unforgivable. Okay. So malignant narcissists, I think not all malignant narcissists are abusers, right? And not all abusers are malignant narcissists. So I think we have to kind of be careful with labels. But I think I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, and I agree that the press portrayed her so long. I think there were certain body movements that just can't be faked. And if you watch Dr. G, he did an amazing video on this that so many of you pointed me to, and he completely, in my opinion, he believed her. He said that stuff is not, you can't fake it. You just can't. So I think that we have a viewership here that is a lot more sensitive, I think, to these types of issues. And you're a bunch of empaths and you're very empathetic, and we all are. And I think it was horrible. Right. Can you imagine, Elle? Fear of having a gun thrown at you and shot into the ceiling. No, I can't. Those messages that he would send her, they were all about control and power and ownership and this God complex that he had, and the testimony from the doctor who and I went back and watched that testimony. We were in the middle of watching back that testimony. And the jury question was whether that doctor's opinion was based on things that Ashley told him or things that he observed. And during direct examination, they were all things that he said that he observed. Right? Yeah, Sarah Boone. Oh my gosh, Stephanie. Sarah Boone. Sarah Boone is like another like Taylor Business and Shonda Vander Ark. I don't think Sarah Boone is as creepy as the two other ones, but bizarre. But think about those questions for later because we're going to have to figure out what you guys want to hear about next, what you want to talk about, and what case you want to talk about next. I watched Dr. G as well, says Jeannie. He's very good at explaining everything. He is. Night owl men do not own women, right? And I mean, all of that testimony. Kim says, I was stunned to find out how many in the chat during the trial had been victims of DV. Yeah, survivors. These are warrior women and men here. We have men as well, women and men, and they could see the signs, I think, a lot better. And I can from my work with survivors and victims than I think so many other people who have no idea what it's like. And to them, I say, you're lucky. You're really lucky that you have no idea what it's like. So count your blessings. Oh, this is not good. StreamYard is not doing what it should be doing right now and separating super chats. If I miss them, I'm really sorry, but hang on a minute. I can see them on YouTube, but they're not. Athena says, I believe there are some good grounds for a successful appeal based on some of the trial judge's rulings. The readback denial was appallingly bad. Yeah, but there's no jury instruction in Florida for that. Like I always say, I'm a believer in the Constitution, in court rules, court procedure. And it's got to be followed. And they need to change the jury instructions, in my opinion, because I think the typical juror does not know that they're entitled to a readback. I think perhaps there's an appealable issue on the DNA situation. But again, I don't know enough about the pretrial stuff to know what happened, whether that was ruled on prior, when it was turned over. Would it have made a difference? Yes, Jamie, agreed. There was a scary amount of self-labeled victims of DV claiming she was not abused. Disgusting. I agree. Because I don't think that any two victims or survivors will act the same way. And I don't really think anybody can predict how somebody should act in a certain situation. I saw so many comments to continue on this comment about how Ashley's reaction to the verdict was no reaction at all, and therefore she must be guilty because she didn't break down crying or screaming or throwing things. And I submit to you that she had almost 4 years to come to terms with the fact that she may be cuffed at the end of the day and hauled off to jail and then booked and then sent to prison. Like, she either could have been medicated, she could have come to terms with it. I don't think that her lack of a reaction upon hearing a guilty verdict means anything with regard to guilt or innocence. And it's bizarre. Yeah, Chastity, same thing. I was shocked at how many DV victims were so against her, yet when I asked the same behaviors, they admitted they did. It's tough to not be believed, yeah. And I mean, this is still a problem, apparently, that women are not believed, and men, and so many of them don't wanna come forward, and this is just reinforcing the reason why, right? And then, right, the Amber Heard thing. Do you think Amber Heard defamation trial opened up the floodgates to go back 50 years? That was a civil case, so it's hard to compare the two, but so many people are comparing, Amber Heard's testimony was so different to Ashley's, and I mean, to me, it's like apples and oranges. I don't like I said, I don't think you can any two victims behave in the same way, or any two people react in the same way, and everybody's situation is different, and that's why there needs to be decisions like this on a case-by-case basis. And if the stand your ground law means anything, I mean, that's what it means. And apparently the jury just didn't believe that she was in fear for her life in the moments leading up to the shooting. It's very different from the Karen Reed case because in this case, Ashley Benefield was absolutely holding the gun that killed Doug Benefield. There's no question about that. The question is, was it justified, right? Did self-defense apply? Was she entitled to stand your ground immunity under the law of Florida? That is not the law in many other states. With Karen Reed, in my opinion, Officer John O'Keefe was just not hit by a car. He just wasn't hit by a car. It's a completely different case. She did not lose the stand your ground hearing. She was not granted summary judgment on stand your ground. So that's Rosie. That's a little bit of a different situation. So her attorneys made a motion to dismiss the case based on stand your ground immunity. The case was not dismissed based on stand your ground immunity at that time. That was a year before the verdict. However, she could still use it as a defense at trial. And the reason that she lost it is because she did not testify and there was no direct testimony. So that is a misconception that a lot of people have, so don't feel bad for having it. John Sant believed her, said Myers. You're right. He did. He's the neighbor. He is the neighbor. And he believed her, and he was afraid for his own safety, too. Look, the guy was traveling all the way from South Carolina to Florida to stalk her. He put a tracker on her car. Add all these things up. And to me, I think she had a right to be afraid. I do not think she lured him to that house. Anybody who knows anything about the dynamics of a DV relationship knows that there are lows and highs, and things are really good, and then things are really bad, and then there's an apology, and then there's hope that it's going to be really good again. And maybe that's what she thought. People are like, oh, if it was my abuser, I would never invite them over to my house. I would never. Well, things weren't really bad at that time. It's my answer to that. Myers said her attorney and counselors believed her. Yep. You are true. Thank you, KR Fairfield, for becoming a new member. Welcome. Who, if anyone, says, well, I'm not a victim. I had someone at my property that I told to leave and I was assaulted. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I don't believe it was as simple as not wanting him there. He would have come anyway. Right. I see people in other chats saying, why didn't she just call 911? She was cornered in a little tiny room without a phone. And somebody looked at her that had assaulted animals and stalked her and sent crazy messages and said, you're effing done. You're effing done. I can sleep over here if I want. You're my wife. Maybe you should start acting like a wife. I mean, a lot of gray areas here. Yeah, most people do lose stand your ground. In fact, thank you, Colors Flight. In fact, stand your ground was also lost at one of those prior cases that we were talking about before, and I'm not sure if it was the popcorn case or it was the George Zimmerman case, but in one of those cases, stand your ground was also denied on motion because that's on papers. Right. All right. So it was Reeves. Curtis Reeves. For those of you who don't know about the popcorn case, I'll tell you a little bit about the popcorn case. On January 13th of 2014, retired American SWAT commander Curtis Reeves Jr. shot and killed retired American Gulf War veteran Chad Olson in a Cobb Theaters movie theater in Wesley Chapel, Florida. The shooting occurred during the movie previews following a brief altercation between the two men. Reeves asked Olson to turn off his cell phone, and Olson threw popcorn at Reeves. 2017, Reeves's legal team attempted to use Florida's Stand Your Ground law as the basis for the defense, which was initially rejected by the court. And then in 2022, Reeves was acquitted of second-degree murder and aggravated battery. So there's that. That was also Stand Your Ground, was denied on motion, but then was acquitted at the trial. Nosy Rosie. Ashley did everything right. She didn't talk. She got an attorney. State didn't prove their case, and she was still convicted. Right. So that's another issue, is that when you stand your ground as a defense, the burden shifts back to the prosecution to say that it was not self-defense. And I don't think they proved their burden. But you know what? They think they did. I don't know if any of you saw this, but we're going to take a look at it now. This is the state attorney and the prosecutors debriefing after the verdict. So let's take a look at this. It's hard to watch, but, well, for many of you, it's hard to watch. I don't know if you've seen this. Let me know that you can hear it. We're going to stop and talk about it as it goes on.
What is your reaction to the verdict?
I am very satisfied with the verdict. I think the jury really considered everything and came to the right conclusion. So I'm very satisfied.
Anyone else want to answer that? No.
I think we're just pleased. I think it was not.
I mean, once somebody called them the evil stepsisters from Cinderella, I can't unsee it now. And, the gloating, all right, here we go. I know, it's hard to watch it, but if you haven't seen it, you need to see it, because this is what's going on out there. Like, they really, really thought they proved their case. So let's listen to a little bit of it.
Not out of our, not something we wouldn't have anticipated that coming back that way. And so I think the jury did a good job with the case. It was difficult.
So why do you think the jury did not go with second-degree murder?
Well, the jury instructions for second-degree murder involve a depraved mind, and which is hatred, ill will, spite, or evil intent.
Hatred, ill will, spite, or evil intent. And that's the same thing we talked about. And I said, I think the jury's going to have a hard time with that, because I don't think that they proved that. And this prosecutor is actually going to agree that she doesn't think that she proved it either, or that they just got it wrong. But let's listen.
And I think probably some of the jurors felt that was present, and some of the jurors maybe did not. So I believe that's what happened.
Okay. And what do you feel like your strongest pieces of evidence were in this case that led to the jury's decision?
You got to watch the other side, so let's watch it.
I think the strongest pieces of evidence were the history as a whole, and then the actual facts and evidence of what happened at that moment when the homicide happened.
Okay, so to me, I think the history as a whole pointed to self-defense. So I take the complete opposite position of this attorney. What's her name again? Suzanne O'Donnell. I think their history as a whole pointed to self-defense, in my opinion, with regard to my 30 years experience working with victims and survivors of all kinds of horrific things, that their history as a whole pointed to her being in fear for her life at that time. She did everything she could. She got away from him as soon as she knew she was pregnant. He shot a gun in the ceiling to make her stop. And the way that they cross-examined her on the stand about when they were fighting in the car, I think, and Ashley was testifying about how he would drive over curbs and drive really crazy to scare her. And then, but you wouldn't, and then the prosecutor was saying, but you wouldn't stop, did you? You wouldn't stop. You wouldn't stop. As if she was the one who was supposed to stop arguing with him to make him stop driving like a crazy person. It made me, talk about gaslighting your audience. But to me, that was the strongest piece of evidence that led to a self-defense argument. But
I think that was the strongest piece.
Yeah, I think it was important that she said that he hit her on the side of the face and where it was, and the evidence that we were able to present to kind of question some of her version of the events. I think that we had some good evidence to challenge what she was saying was her version of events.
Oh, so if he punched her in the eye, it would have been more believable? Is that what she's saying? Because he punched her in the side of the head. And by the way, her friend Barbara, who saw her that night, said that her head was swollen and her eye was swollen. But because she said that she was punched in the side of the head, it was less believable. See, this is where I have a real disconnect here with what these women are saying. And it frightens me to the point where they just don't get it. They just don't get it. And then they go on to say during this interview that they actually do have a lot of sympathy for victims of DV, and they stand behind them. So listen, because you can tell me if it rings hollow with you too.
So you think that's what won your case?
Not completely, but I think that was important.
It's helpful.
Yes.
Okay.
Funny.
And what do you think really happened after Doug arrived at Ashley's the mother's home?
I don't really want to comment on that. I only want to comment with about things in the trial. So,
okay. And the argument and motive that you laid out at trial was that Ashley sought sole custody of her child and needed Doug out of the way by a specific date, which speaks to an intent and premeditated plan to kill. Did you ever consider filing first-degree murder charges? And why do you feel second degree was more appropriate in this case?
we consider everything when we're deciding to charge a case. We look at every charge and we decide which charge is the most appropriate for the facts. And in this particular case, we felt
what's the life?
her justification for being so scared maybe was not appropriate.
I think, as we look at the verdict of the jury.
Hold on, I was just rejiggering the closed caption. So let's go back.
We consider everything when we're deciding to charge a case. We look at every charge and we decide which charge is the most appropriate for the facts. And in this particular case, we felt second degree was a better charge than first degree premeditated.
Okay. Ashley Benefield claimed, obviously, domestic violence. She was very emotional when she testified. As a woman, she touched me when I was watching it. I sympathized as a mother.
Good on you, reporter. Good on you. Good. I didn't watch this whole thing either because I couldn't bring myself to watch it. That's why I wanted to wait to watch it with you, all of you. So I'm glad the reporter said that. Let's see what her retort to this is.
That jury was 5 women, 1 man. How do you feel that you were able to convince this almost predominantly female jury otherwise to think of it a little differently?
I think what I am willing to say about that at this point is it made a difference to them that her past domestic violence that she claimed was so long ago. It was 3 years ago. And that basically within...
What about the stalking? What about the stalking? So the past domestic violence from 3 years ago is okay. Does that mean somebody's never going to try it again? I mean, is that what you want us to believe? I don't think she can speak to what the jury believed because I don't know that she spoke to the jury afterwards. So is that what we're saying? That just because somebody is a perpetrator of domestic violence 3 years ago, it doesn't mean they're going to do it again?
In the 3 years, there hadn't been any violence in between.
But there was stalking.
So I believe...
But there was stalking and there was a tracker put on her car and there was him showing up looking in her windows and in her driveway. And she was trying to go through the legal channels to try and get restraining orders against him, but he couldn't get close enough to commit any violence against her personally. So then we can't believe that it actually happened that day. Like the more I listen to this, the angrier it makes me, just like I'm sure it makes you angry too.
Believe that they felt that her justification for being so scared maybe was not appropriate.
I think,
appropriate.
As we look at the verdict of the jury and you mentioned the composition of the jury, I think one of the things that we know definitively about this case is that, the court randomly selected 6 members from our community, right? These are folks from our community right here in Manatee County that from everything that we saw and we observed that they fairly and impartially absorbed, listened, evaluated, and considered all of the evidence in this case. And they heard everything. They heard the state side, they heard the defense side, they heard from the state experts, they heard from the defense experts.
Well, they didn't hear everything because there's a lot of stuff they weren't allowed to hear that was excluded prior to trial. So they didn't hear everything. They stayed there for 6 hours into the night and rendered their verdict at something like, I forget what time, you guys, I think it was after 10 p.m. Eastern time. They stayed there. They ate their pizza and soda. They didn't come back the next day. So yes, Amanda, he tried to buy the house next door, the house right behind her mother's house, during the time that there was an active order of protection against him that was valid. So that's kind of scary. I mean, how scared do you need to be for your child? I don't know. Go on. It's 6 people. So the the court randomly selected the jurors. I thought, were the attorneys in Florida not involved in jury selection?
Experts, and then they listen to the judge give them the instructions on the law in this case. And I think that they very carefully and attentively listened and applied the law to this case. And I think that we now saw that a jury has rendered a fair and impartial verdict in this case, having considered everything. They know everything in this case. They've considered all of the evidence.
All right. Touchy subject, though, domestic violence. What would you like? Well, what message do you send to victims of domestic violence right now who find themselves in threatening situations? Because this is something, unfortunately, that goes on daily.
Yeah. This reporter is great,
I would say, first and foremost, I mean, I think that what I would say is the state attorney and us as an office, and I think all of us that are sitting here with Suzanne and Rebecca, we stand strong against domestic violence. We're an office that strongly believes in vigorously prosecuting those that commit acts of domestic abuse.
You aggressively prosecute those who commit acts of domestic abuse. But it's the victims that you also vigorously prosecute when they try to defend themselves. Okay, got it. You wouldn't even issue her a restraining order against this guy with all of this evidence that you said that they heard. There was even more evidence, I'm sure, with regard to the restraining order. But you vigorously prosecute those that commit acts of domestic violence, domestic abuse. Okay.
But in every case, I think it really requires a careful analysis. If there is going to be use of force, right? And here where it takes someone's life, I think we're going to analyze and consider those events. And so I think my conclusion is, you can't take the law into your own hands. And I think that's what Ashley Benefield demonstrated here, is that she wasn't happy with the judicial system and she wanted certain things that she didn't get through the judicial system, and she decided to take the law into her own hands. But that doesn't take away.
And do what? So she decided she was going to kill him because she didn't get anywhere in family court, and what? And potentially go to jail for 30 years or prison and leave her child without any parents? Is that what you think she really did here? Or does it make more sense, right? Occam's razor. Does it make more sense? Is it more likely that she really did fear for her life in that moment, and she was cornered into a little tiny room with a man who said you're effing done, who was built like he was a really big muscular guy who, by the way, it was well known that he was always armed. She had no reason to think that he was not armed that day and was actually maybe trying to protect herself and her child. I don't know. I'm still not seeing it.
From victims of domestic violence. And we know that there were some things that occurred here in this case that he shouldn't have done. And we don't stand by those things, right? We know that there were things like that occurred. But we strongly stand with the victims of domestic violence. We're going to aggressively prosecute those that commit acts of domestic violence. And we're going to stand with our victims. But we will, on every single case, we're going to closely analyze the facts and evidence in this case. And I think at the end of the day, in this particular case, when it dealing with Ashley Benefield, when you looked at that fatal moment when she took the life of a father of two young children, two children and a husband, someone who
it wasn't two young children. One of them was older, who, by the way, I think he kind of, like, where was Eva when he was chasing after Ashley in Florida? I don't know. If anybody knows, let me know. I still haven't found an answer to that. And also, never once in any of those text messages that we saw did he ever ask about Emerson, ever. It was all about getting to Ashley and getting control of Ashley. Was he a loving father to Emerson? I haven't seen any evidence of that either.
Had demonstrated his desire to reconcile, that he loved her, and that he wanted to move to Maryland to be with her and to reconcile with the child.
So was he not on good terms with the child, or was he just chasing her? So, I mean, those of you who know the cycle of violence, right? Of course they want to reconcile. Of course they promise to change. Do they change? I don't know. I saw somebody in here who said, no, they don't change. Right, Max. DV shouldn't be considered a touchy subject because it needs to be spoken out about. And I know you've told your story here too. So it needs to be spoken about. It's not a touchy subject. This is real. And coercive control is real. And there's a bill sitting in South Carolina. I believe it's South Carolina. Yep. A coercive control bill that may have saved, Micah Miller, who's another victim of coercive control. And it's not being talked about and people don't understand it. And that's part of the problem.
The way in which that event unfolded, that it was not a justified use of force. And the one thing I'll tell you about the Manatee County Sheriff's Office and Rebecca and Suzanne and our team here, they've been involved in this case, and I would say this was not a brief investigation. This was 4 years of us speaking with investigators, working with investigators, speaking to all of the parties that were involved.
Oh, do you mean the lead investigator that you didn't even call to testify at the trial because he decided that she was guilty of murder within the first 30 minutes when he went to get the search warrant? Do you mean that guy? That guy whose testimony was going to be so embarrassing for you that you didn't even call him in your case in chief? That guy? Okay.
Involved in this case, all of the lawyers that were involved, the medical professionals, the crime scene professionals, hearing everything that the defense had. This was a very well vetted case and very well understood case, I think, by our folks here.
Well understood.
Suzanne. Okay. And I think they did a great job of presenting that. And so I'm grateful to the jury for rendering a fair and impartial verdict. And I think justice was heard in this county this week.
And as to those victims, I think we would say that law enforcement in this community takes it very seriously, like Ed said, and so do we. And we would just ask them to get help, to do what they think is best for their situation and to seek help from their family or their law enforcement or whoever that can help them.
Really? Because Ashley tried to seek help from your law enforcement and they wouldn't help her. In fact, your guy who you actually did call to testify, which was a little shocking, said that he found Ashley really annoying because she called him 30 times to try and get him to enforce the, restraining order that she had in South Carolina. And he found her to be really annoying. So if that's your poster child for law enforcement really cares about victims in this county, maybe you ought to look for a new poster boy, is all I'm saying. Hold on, I got to hear that again. Mm-hmm.
This week.
And as to those victims, I think we would say that law enforcement in this community takes it very seriously, like Ed said, and so do we. And we would just ask them to get help, to do what they think is best for their situation and to seek help from their family or their law enforcement or whoever that can help them. And when they get here, we'll be here to help them as the best we can if law allows it.
Oh, yeah.
Do you feel like
you'll
this
help? Here's Darbykins, who says, Darbykins said, I tried to go to a DV shelter and they told me no because I had a van I could live in. I don't know where you live, Darbykins, and that's a horrifying story. And I'm so sorry to hear that. But yeah, people who have been through it kind of know the system and know that the system doesn't always work in their favor.
Case changes the way people may respond to this, or sending a strong message. You said that was one of them. Do not take the law into your own hands.
I think that is what was very clear to us here, is that this was an example of someone that decided to take the law into their own hands. And I think that's going to have legal consequences and repercussions. And so that's what people need to be careful about. But we do stand with victims and we do fight against domestic abusers and we do hold them accountable. So as Rebecca indicated, they do need to report it. They do need to talk to law enforcement. Law enforcement's going to work very closely with them to do everything they can to protect them. And we have wonderful organizations in our community that care about our.
I mean, this is just wow, just wow, just wow. Scott, I want to know this too. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know when he's up for re-election. Somebody said, do not vote him back into office. But yeah, please come to law enforcement. We're going to help you. Just like the poster child. Amanda Murray says, most times law enforcement doesn't help and a piece of paper doesn't stop a bullet or hands or a knife. That's right. You are correct. The Where Are We tribe says they couldn't even find which pages the defense used. They wanted to have which paragraphs he was using 4 years, and they still wanted defense to do their job. I don't know what that's in response to, if that is in response to another comment or this video. Andrea Clark says, my family never helped me, so they need to stop that. You know who else's family didn't help her? The poor woman who's missing in Shasta County, California. Nikki McCain. Her family knew she was being severely beaten for 5 years. There were 4 felony DV charges against her husband, Tyler McCain. Nikki is now missing, and the felony charges against Tyler were dropped. And her family never helped her either. Right. Agreed. Desiree says, no, they didn't investigate for 4 years. They spent that time getting mainstream media to villainize her. Mm-hmm. Paddle Leon says, the abuse reports for Emerson came from health professionals. This reminds me of, it's a completely different case, but a mother sacrificing herself for her child's safety and well-being, just like Beata Kowalski took her own life to save her daughter, Maya Kowalski, from the system. There are some great lengths that a mother will go to protect her child or a father.
Victims and want to provide support to them.
Okay. As of now, no sentencing date, as I know of, has been set.
That is correct.
Okay. What are you recommending, or what are you hoping for?
We're recommending the maximum sentence. The maximum sentence is 30 years, and that's what the state would recommend.
And as I hear that question and I frame that question, to me, you know, what's the life of Doug Benefield worth, right? A family man who had 2 children, who was in the prime of his life. What is the life of one's, you know, the loss that his family felt, right? All of his family, his loved ones, all those that cared about him.
How come nobody got up on the stand and said, Doug Benefield was a really gentle guy. He never would hurt a fly. He was so this, that, and the other. There was none of that kind of testimony. In fact, all the testimony about the abuse of animals, all admitted by him. And we didn't hear any of that. And, you know, we heard Cousin Tommy get up there, who, by the way, knew so little about this cousin that he said he was so close to, that when he went to meet Ashley for the first time, he called Doug because he was in town or something. And they had already been married for 8 months. And Doug said something like, no, I can't. Ashley's not feeling well. And Cousin Tommy said, who's Ashley? Okay, so Cousin Tommy, who portends that he is so tight or was so tight with Doug, and they were like brothers, didn't even know that Doug got married 9 months after his wife had passed away, without telling his 15-year-old daughter, kept it a secret from her. You know, how tight was Tommy anyway with Doug that they made him the family spokesperson? I was like, what? Nobody got on the stand and said what a great guy he was. All the evidence pointed in the other direction. Yeah, we will hear them at sentencing, right? We will. They'll do victim impact statements and we'll hear about it. But if this verdict went in the other direction, they'll say stuff like, oh, we should have had people up there talking about what a great guy he was, right? He never would hurt a fly.
And so that's why, you know, we're proud with the verdict. We think that this spoke justice for the family of Doug Benefield. But his life was worth something, and it deserves an appropriate punishment.
Right. Team Brittany, what is Ashley's life worth? They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about the life of now her daughter, who's going to grow up either in the system or visiting her mother in prison. They don't want to talk about that. Summer, I agree with this. DV needs to be understood and not brushed under the carpet, 100%. And that's what when I was in shock and horror about Ashley's daughter being outside with a sign saying, "Please keep my mommy out of jail," or whatever it said. And by the way, I don't even know if it was officially confirmed that it was her daughter out there. But I said, "Can anybody point me to the other side of this? Like, is there any good from having her daughter out there with a sign? It's not going to look good to the jury." People said to me, "Melanie, DV is generational. We need our daughters to know about it, to stand up to it, to break the cycle." And I see that. It's true. Oh, thank you, Born Free. I was going to email you to see if you were okay after that. Yeah, I was okay. I had to jump off the air because I was already late picking up a kid. And then I went to Vegas to see the Grateful Dead the next day. So I was out of here for a week. And thank you, though. Thank you for your concern. What's her life worth?
When it's a case like this, it's very hard because you only had Ashley's side. You had family and people that knew them. But was this a difficult case to try because of that? It was very, it was only from Ashley's side.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's not uncommon in self-defense cases, and Suzanne and I try a lot of cases together here, and we see it a lot. And
they try a lot of cases together. The dream team over here.
It does make it much more difficult because you're dealing with one version of events, like you said, and it's hard sometimes to counteract. I don't know what the right word would be to show that whether or not their story is true.
And I think the best way to do that is to look at the actual facts of what happened and see if they match with the story that the one person is telling.
Like the physical evidence.
And I think that played into it in this case, that I think the one person that was telling the story was telling a story that didn't necessarily match with the rest of the physical evidence in the case.
And go ahead.
Well, I mean, I guess just the only other thing I wanted to add is, law enforcement on a daily basis, when they are called to evaluate a use of force case where someone's lost their life, they conduct their investigation and make a determination as to whether or not the individual was justified in the use of force. And then we do the same thing. And we have seen examples where law enforcement's made that determination and they don't refer charges. And there have been cases that are referred to this office and we haven't filed charges because we believe that there is a justified use of force. So I think it really does depend uniquely on each case. And
it does. It's on a case-by-case basis. And I don't even want to waste too much time on this. But if you want to see it, the rest of this, there's a whole other 10 more minutes to go. It is ABC 7 Sarasota, and this was posted 4 days ago. And you can go watch the entire thing in all of its glory if you so choose. Yes, Tucker, the body language expert said there's no way she could be faking it. I want to show you something else. Give me a second here to find it for you. This is something that will be dropping on Friday. I suggest that you subscribe. His name is Sergio Denaro. We've looked at his videos before. He has given me permission to play them before. And he will be dropping, his YouTube channel is called Truth Revealed. He's going to be dropping full videos on Friday, but I'm going to show you the teaser to tell you to go subscribe if you can't wait to see this. And there's one F word in there, so I'm going to cough over it. Hopefully I'll catch it so that YouTube doesn't.
As you're grabbing the gun, what, if anything, did you hear? I heard the door hitting the doorstop. This is just straight from her memory at this point. Her senses are in life or death mode. The spring that goes when the door hits the doorstop is something that will be traumatic for her for the rest of her life. Doug was standing in the doorway. His face was red, like the veins were bulging in his neck. The way he was looking at me, he didn't even look like Doug. His eyes were black.
And what do you see, Ashley, when you look up?
Doug was standing in the doorway. His face was red. The veins were bulging in his neck. The way he was looking at me, it didn't even look like Doug. His eyes were black. He said, "You're fucking done."
That's it. Sergio is going to be dropping 3 videos on that. On Friday, Truth Revealed, I put the handle right down here. So if you want to go follow him, there it is for you. David, thanks for the 5, says many states don't have stand your ground laws, but most do have a castle doctrine law. That is true. Oh, thanks, One Step Beyond You. So here's a little toward your ticket to Dave Matthews at Farm Aid in Saratoga Springs. Oh, when is that going to be? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for the 10. Amanda, I don't believe she should have testified. What say you? I think she had to testify, Amanda. I think without her testimony, she definitely would have been convicted, maybe even of murder. I think the jury wanted to hear her story. I think they needed to hear her story. I don't think it was her testimony that did her in, because I found her testimony credible. But I mean, obviously, it's a very subjective standard. So that's my opinion. Venus Blue, is there a way to email? Ashley has a fundraiser. If you want to put the fundraiser in the comments, I'll pin it to the top after the video is over. Darbykins said, that we already covered this, that you tried to go to a DV shelter and they told you no because you had a van that you could sleep in. It's horrifying. Thank you for standing strong for survivors of DAV. Thank you, Rousler's mom. Thank you. Thank you guys for listening to it. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of hateful comments after this, but it is what it is, because hate sells, my friends. Hate sells. Susie Cupcake says the black eyes phenomenon is real. I witnessed my ex's turn from blue to black, and in that moment saw down to his soul. It was pure evil. It's horrifying. I bet you, I don't know that Ashley's going to do any interviews. I'm sure she won't, because that will affect any appeals that she may have. She probably will not speak out at all, but I bet if you asked her if she would do it again, she would tell you she would. Because in her mind, I think that she thought and truly believed that she was protecting not only herself, but her daughter. I truly believe that. What say you? Samantha says, terribly sad for Ashley, but also for future victims or people who are suffering now but decide to not press charges because of this. Yeah. That's why I just don't get the thank you, Team Brittany. Yes, 100%. I just don't get the whole she set him up theory. Like I don't get that theory. She set him up for what? So that she could be a single parent? I mean, the motive has to be, to me, I mean, they don't have to prove motive, right? We know that, but there was no financial motive. He didn't have any money. He didn't have any life insurance. He wasn't paying child support. People think that she targeted him because she really wanted a baby, and then she did away with him because she really wanted to be a single parent. I don't know. It just doesn't. It doesn't make sense to me. Marcy said if they were confident in their trying this case, they wouldn't feel the need to do a 30-minute interview attempting to convince us they did the right thing. Uh-huh. Yeah. Meyer says her mistake was letting him come with the U-Haul. Yeah, a lot of people think that was, like, oh, if she was really afraid of him, she never would have let him come over to help her pack. I mean, who knows if that was even her choice? The guy showed up a lot, apparently. He showed up a lot. Thanks, Nina. Did you watch the video of Truth Revealed of Higgins? Crazy Sergio is amazing. I don't know. I've watched a lot of videos. I'm not sure if I watched that one yet, but it's right on my playlist. So I think I will, Nina. Thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate you. Intuitive Karen says the prosecution was so cold and re-abused Ashley. See, you are intuitive. So many of you are intuitive here and have great intuition and great instincts. Laura says, mine said, so what? We all know you bruise easily. Yeah. Mother of Cat said if she wanted to be a single parent, she would have been with a deadbeat younger person. Right. Maybe, right? Kindness Cake, the she set him up theory was lousy. I agree. Plus, it officially failed in a court of law, not second degree. I mean, look, none of us were there. None of us know what really happened. So the jury's filling in their own blanks, just like we are. And we're in the minority here, folks. We're in the minority. Summer says, yes, love, look at the actual facts and evidence and understand them. I don't know if you're talking to me or someone in the chat. Mag said she was keeping the peace. If you know, you know. Myers says we all let our guards down with abusers. He was escalating. That's why I wish so many of these like naysayers that she set him up and she's a cold-blooded killer would listen to you guys, because you guys make so much sense because you've been through it. Hemisphere, that don't make sense to me. She planned this all out. I don't believe anyone going through the legal steps to separate herself from Doug. Charicity says it's not like she let him come. Her choice was an oop. She had to improvise. Raymond Dieu says, if you don't let him help, then you suffer the consequences. Yep. Ann Smith says, I believe her with all my heart. Right. That's right, Laura. The Grateful Dead would do the world good if everyone listened to them. Deborah says, my ex stalked me, leaving vases of flowers on my car, inside my car, at my home and workplace. The police said, it looks like he loves you. No violence and no witnesses. So much for the restraining order. It's horrifying. Hey now, Jason. Good to see you too. Very best. And I think the jury rushed and gave a compromised verdict. Very sad. I know that they did say that one of the jurors had a conflict and had to get out of there, I think by Wednesday or something. Aslan, I met Ashley was not guilty. Maybe people should stop believing one-sided stories. I don't know what you're referring to, but I think you've left me some nasty comments before. But it's a subjective standard, isn't it? If you've never been through any violence or any intimate partner violence or coercive control or any sort of thing like that, then I think you should consider yourself lucky. And maybe you might learn something if you listen to some of the people in this chat who've been there, who've been through it. And some who are not so lucky to survive, like perhaps Nikki McCain in Shasta County, Florida. 7LilBoo7 says, huge wake-up call for those that don't know the world we live in. Women's suffrage is real. Men too. There are men who are also victims and survivors in this chat and out there. As Galish says, after my abuser was finished abusing, he would say, I didn't touch you. Sure, I didn't. Mother of Cassie chased her into a room with a closed door after being asked to leave. If he hadn't done that, he would still be here. And if she hadn't had protection, she may be the one who isn't here. It's a tough case. Listen, it's a tough case. It's not like I'm afraid to handle the tough cases. I handled Jennifer Crumbly too. And I thought that was a really tough case. I took a lot of heat for that one too. And Karen Reed. But I'm not a neutral channel. People get on here, you're so biased, I can listen. I'm not biased. I have an opinion. I'm going to share my opinion with you. If you don't want to hear my opinion, go watch a robotic voice, a robotic channel. Serene says, sadly, when you are the victim of DV, rarely are you believed, therefore remaining silent. Right. Samantha says she also had to appease him because of his anger. So allowing him to help be a part of the process made it easier to get along and not have him rage out trying to get custody. Right. And there was something that the prosecution closed on, and they said that Doug had filed for sole custody, but that was not anywhere in the trial. I didn't hear that anywhere in the trial. He also insisted on sharing a U-Haul with her to move his own stuff and then got mad when she wanted her stuff in the back of the truck, right? Born Free says she couldn't have asked anyone else to help her move boxes because he was very jealous. Spoken TC, I'm always curious why women don't use hidden cameras as proof. What do you think's going to happen when he finds the hidden cameras? What do you think's going to happen then? Janai says, I believe her with all my heart too, and I feel all these comments, been there. When you have babies with them, it's an extremely dynamic situation, right? You guys still have to co-parent, right? Myers says the DV police told me I believe in karma. Robin. Thank you, Robin. Robin Hunter. You are so correct. Set him up for what? He was a nobody and nothing except a sociopath. In my opinion, the prosecution team is an utter disgrace to humanity. Glitter Beauty says it's funny how they say that, but they're somehow convinced that she planned this all out. No proof, just a one-sided story that they all made up. Crazy. Thanks, Melissa. Kaleidohope says Doug wasn't the kind of guy to take no for an answer. Yep. I think we saw that, right? Deanne B, I don't know if you were here. I played a little bit of that interview. I don't know if so you can rewind later. Don't do it now. Someone interviewed the state after and I wanted to throw up. I wish I remember where I watched it. It was Sarasota 7. I played it earlier if that's the one you're thinking of. And they said they stand up for DV victims. They believe them. They want them to call law enforcement, and get their families to help them. That's what they want. That's what they want. Athena says, I don't believe he would still be here if he survived moving day. Doug would have snapped eventually. Interesting theory. Oh, look at Susie Cupcake coming in with the quote. Somebody once told me the man who walks through the front door with a dozen roses is the same man who walks through the front door with a loaded gun. The Guns N' Roses moments became very clear. They did to us, but I guess not to the jury. I guess they just didn't make sense to the jury. And we talked a lot about this during the trial. And I asked you repeatedly because I wasn't sure. What do you think about the demographic of the women on the jury being in their 60s, 70s, and 80s? I said it could go either way. I thought either they had been through it all and they believe her, or they're going to be like, we've been through so much worse, we don't believe her. Or, there's a generation above mine that sort of put up with stuff that my generation and the generations below me may not put up with. So many people stayed married in other generations for the sake of the children and they didn't make waves and they just stayed in it. And so I don't know, unless a juror speaks out, we don't know. I also am not crazy about the 6-person jury system in Florida, to be honest. I don't think 6 people is enough to decide a felony murder case. In Florida, criminal juries are made of 6, unless it's a capital murder case, unless the death penalty is involved. Then they have 12 jurors. I don't think 6 people is enough. But nobody asked me when they were making the Florida rules, so that's where we are. Wolfie Muse says, don't even try if you only suffer from psychological or emotional abuse. It was my mom, the person who's supposed to love me more than anything. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. How many times have we heard of husbands killing wife, kids, and even mother-in-laws? Yes, Colors Flight. Okay, so how about Chad Dorman? How about Chad Dorman, who executed 3 of his 3 little boys, his own children? What kind of history did that guy have? I don't know. I haven't dug into it enough because the cases with children really break my heart, and it's too hard for me to read about sometimes. And so I didn't really dig into that too much. But he just took a plea deal to avoid the death penalty and pled guilty. But did his wife ever try to get restraining orders against him? Does anybody know the Chad Dorman story and history? Because that was horrifying what he did. There will never be a trial in that case because he just pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. He had no history. He had no history. Chad Dorman, right? Okay, so if that's true and he had no history, and one day he just snapped and executed his 3 little beautiful boys, like that's insane. Dewey, thanks for the 10. I don't believe a majority male legislature passed stand your ground for survivors of DV. I wonder how many women have been protected by the law compared to men. I didn't have the time to do the research on that. And we did watch the verdict of Marsha Thompson being acquitted, but her and it was right before Ashley Benefield's trial, but her case was based on battered spouse, not stand your ground. And I think that was the difference here. They wouldn't let Ashley use battered spouse as a defense because there was no history of actual physical battering. And also, they were not living together at the time, which battered spouse defense requires under the law. But that's a great point. Because when you look at, George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin, and you look at Chad Olson and Curtis Reeves, and then you look at a case like Ashley's, who's got more of a right to be afraid? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but yeah, I think, Dewey, you might have a point there. Chloe Albert's Revenge. Hello, Chloe Albert's Revenge. When people can't make a sensible argument, she becomes an evil genius, like how Karen Reed backed a V8 up in a straight line, then drove home perfectly but drunk. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Thank you, Rolly and Schnoonrad, for your very generous super chat. I appreciate you so very much from, I think, South Africa. And Chloe says abusers are getting smarter. Law should catch up. Yeah. I mean, when somebody put that comment in before about like why they don't have hidden cameras, because they're really going to be mad. Why don't they just call the police? Why don't they just call 911? And someone commented in the comments one day, what do you think's going to happen when they bring them in and then they let them out the same night? What do you think's going to happen when they get home then? How mad do you think they're going to be then? Right? Truth Seeker is about Chad Darman. I heard she said that they were a happy, normal family. Oh my goodness. Jessica, thank you so much, Jessica Souza. Hello, good afternoon. My heart breaks for Ashley. She shouldn't be in jail for protecting herself. Jail is not where Ashley should be. The jury got it wrong. I think you find a lot of people in this chat who may agree with you. There's no date right now for the sentencing, so we don't know when that's going to be, but obviously we will follow it. If you don't know about Chad Dorman, don't look it up. It's going to break your heart. I have not seen, Elisa Meyer, any statements from Ashley's lawyer. Have not. If anybody has, maybe you can point me in that direction, but I have not seen it. Did I just address this? Abusers are getting smarter. Laws should catch up. Agree with you. I do agree with you. So we will. She's still in jail. So they cuffed her and they brought her to jail. They're booking her. They're doing a pre-sentencing investigation. And that's where it stands right now. Some people had asked about what a PSI is. So I pulled up that statute. We can take a quick look at that while we're here. And then we are going to teleport over to my 4:30 show on Karen Reed. So let's take a quick look at this. Because I'm a lawyer and that's what we do. We look at the laws. So they will be doing a PSI or a pre-sentence investigation report. And here's what it consists of in the state of Florida. Pre-sentence investigation reports where the defendant in a criminal case has been found guilty or has entered a plea of guilty, but in this case, she was found guilty. The court may refer the case to the Department of Corrections for investigation and recommendation. Upon request of the court, it should be the duty of the department to make either or both of the following reports in writing to the circuit court at a specified time prior to sentencing, depending upon the circumstances of the offender and the offense. The full report shall include a complete description of the situation surrounding the criminal activity with which the offender has been charged, including a synopsis of the trial transcript if one has been made, the offender's sentencing status, including whether the offender is a first offender, which in this case she is, the offender's prior record of arrests and convictions, of which I believe she has none, the offender's educational background, employment background, the offender's financial status, including income, social history of the offender, residence history of the offender's medical history, and if appropriate, a psychological or psychiatric evaluation, information about the environments to which the offender might return, information about any resources available to assist the offender. I'll scroll by here slowly so you can come back and read this at your leisure if you so desire and freeze it accordingly. And so once that pre-sentence investigation report is done, that will be considered by the court when the court imposes sentence. And in this case, we do not know when the sentencing will be, but we will stay on top of it for you. Not to be rude, but this chat is the only chat I have seen that does not agree with Ashley's verdict. So there are a lot of people that didn't believe her. There absolutely are. That's not rude. You can disagree in a nice way, and that is a nice way. So thank you, M. Osland. There are a lot of people who do not believe her. And the jury also did not believe her. And so that is why she was found guilty of manslaughter, and that is why she is facing a prison term of up to 30 years. Up to 30 years or a minimum of 30 years? And that, misery loves company, monetizing evil. Yeah. Let's take a look at, well, we don't really have time to take a look at anything because we have to jump over to the Karen Reed stream. But I wanted to get on here and talk to you guys about this because I know you had some very strong feelings about it. And I hope Ashley's psych evaluations are used in the PSI, says Laura. So thank you so much. I'm at Airlines. Departed. Bye. I know I don't understand why people have to come on here and spew hatred. We can disagree. We can disagree respectfully, but I'm not going to tolerate the hate. It's just not tolerated here. So, oh well. Wine teller infused. The 30 years makes me so upset for the little human without her mom. It disturbs me. Don't have children, but my God, what a sad story. Agreed. Yeah, it is up to 30 because of the firearm. You are correct. People were bashing me there today when I said it was. So I looked it up quickly, and it's like a 15 years for manslaughter, and then it's another 15 for the firearm. So yeah, I did correct myself. But there's a lot of people who like to be right. Great to see you too, Jill. Till we meet again. Yeah, the people who have no experience are very lucky. Fasten your seatbelts, everyone. We are now boarding the Reed Stream Airlines. I will meet you over there. Everyone, thank you so much for coming today. I've missed you. We're going to go talk about Karen Reed for a little while. Hold on tight. Thank you, mods, for keeping the chat classy. I don't know if it was that hard today, but it's always hard. It's always hard over here. Safe travels. And remember, thank you, mods, and to my viewers, replay viewers, and everyone who tuned in during this stream. Thank you so very much for coming. Have a beautiful day if you're not going to join us with Karen Reed, but you might want to come on over there because there's going to be fun. Remember, be cool, be kind, be classy. It is not hard, really. It is so not hard. You can come for me in the comments respectfully, but if you're going to spew hatred and craziness, then you don't have to stay here. The block button is your friend. Peace, my friends. I will see you at Karen Reed in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Safe travels.